everybody. How you doing? This is Bruce with the Bowski Studio. I am overwhelmed with all the response I got on my last video. It means a lot to me that people are reaching out with words of encouragement, and it's nice to know that I'm connecting also. And we're talking, having some communication about what we as artists go through. So thank you so much for all the feedback. What I've decided to do is start digging myself out of this little funk, and to do that, like I mentioned in my last video, I played around some Casein painting today, and going to do a little street scene, little urban street scene, residential street scene, and I hope you enjoy it. Let me know. I wasn't looking for anything in terms of great draftsmanship or super detailed. I want to just feel out the medium and see where it's going to take me in my journey, kind of going forward creatively. So if you're new to my channel, watching for the first time, hey, thanks for joining us. And if you like what you see, let me know in the comments. And also I invite you to subscribe. If you do, be sure to hit the bell notification icon. It will alert you to as when I post new videos. Apparently there's also a way that you can select all uploads. Otherwise, the YouTube algorithm's going to do something weird and only show you certain ones that you're interested in for what you've been viewing on YouTube. I don't know how it works. But anyway, thanks for joining me, and let's get started. Okay, I'm going to go over the Casein supplies that I bought. And as you can see on the right, Richardson Casein paints. Bought a selection of those. I started out with a kit and then added a couple extra tubes that were not in the kit. Just a little terry cloth towel for wipe and brush. I'll probably add another little strip. I mean, this is just what I had quickly to put together a little kit. Ruler in case I need some straight lines. I will look into somewhere I have my 6-inch little ruler. Make it a little smaller. Little painter's tape in case I want to tape off a border on the paper, or for some reason I need to tape the painting surface to a support. Then we have just a cheap, I'm going to try this first, little watercolor thing to paint on, store the paints. They will of course eventually dry up, but I'll try to be generous enough on site to paint with some paint, and then when I'm done, clean up. Then to practice, I know I've heard Casein should be done on a rigid surface. I will not be painting in super thick layers, so I'm going to experiment with this heavyweight gray tone paper. I've sketched on these type of sketch pads, and I really like them, so I thought I'd try the mixed media pad. And then I have a moleskin kind of landscape format pad. Paper's not super thick, but what I practiced with, just a couple rubber bands too to hold the cover open if I need to. Better to have them and not need them. Experimenting with working on some this is Casein paint that I've pre-toned a bit. And this is some gray gesso. And then we have some a quick little coat of some burnt sienna Casein. And we'll see what happens. I have no idea. Never worked with this. Used to do watercolor. Played around with acrylics way long ago. So, I'm going to look forward to this. Here's my brush roll. I took a standard bamboo thing you can buy at the art store, because a lot of these brushes are short-handled. I have some watercolor pencils in there and an assortment of brushes. And I took the longer bamboo roll and I took it down my chop saw to create a smaller little roll-up thing. But I actually treated myself to the Richardson travel set, just what James Gurney recommended for what he uses for the, it's a nylon case with brushes in it. Seems conducive to just flip it open and have your brushes right there, so we'll see. Couple assorted clips, nothing new there. And I had these little cups around for storing water. And I'm still experimenting with the actual easel part, so I won't show that in this video, but it is going to involve playing around with some Velcro attachments, so I have some Velcro on the bottom. And he also recommended a diffuser shield that he's made a homemade version. I'm going to play around with my photography stuff. I have this 12-inch reflector. It's like a diffuser. It's white. And I got to figure out a holding method, some kind of stick with a clamp. But I think this will work pretty good, and it folds up like this. So that's what I'm going to be playing around with. Okay, hey everybody, how's it going? So here's the palette I'm going to be using, as you can see. Just showing them there: titanium white, some ultramarine blue, raw umber, Shiva rose, and some cad yellow lights. So that should be pretty interesting. And for my work surface, oh, there's my reference photo I'll be using. You can see how I didn't follow anything too much. It was just more of a quick little sketch to experiment with the paint. And I've just taped it down to on a sawhorse. I have this board and just taped it there for this first Casein painting. In the future, I will be experimenting, of course, on my wall easel. Taking one of my watercolor pencils and just finding some basic lines of the composition. Not going to go into too much crazy detail because you'll end up painting over most of it anyway. I don't want it to... I think if you have too detailed drawing, depending on the subject, of course, but the level of detail on certain subjects would be required. But this is pretty open and can be suggestive, except for the little houses, of course, in the distance I'm working on right now. So this will give me the opportunity to really get the composition in there and change any proportions if I need to. I'm not even, in this particular video, not even worried about doing my typical proportional measuring, height by width and that sort of thing to get proper proportions. Just having fun in this one. And I taped down the paper, of course, with some painter's tape. I just wanted to let everyone know, too, that I will be coming out with another sort of episode of Artist Struggles. There's some other topics I wanted to cover, so I've kind of been roughing it out on paper, and I want it to make sense, so I'm trying to organize it a bit and get it together. So I'll be looking for that in the near future and continue on with this. Now, I do have some gouache paint that I've played around with in the past for the same idea of going out for a lighter sketch kit. I just thought I'd try the Casein. From what I understand, from what I've seen on videos, the ability to go back over previous layers very quickly because it sets up and dries fairly quick. You won't be disturbing the under layer that with gouache. I've had that experience of happening even when I've tried to quickly go over some gouache with a new color. If you're not careful, it can disturb. But I won't give up on gouache. I will try it again. Now here I am, and I'm using these flat brushes. I pretty much invested in the Richardson set, travel set, as for a portable brush carrier. You don't see it in this particular setup because the order had not come in yet, but similar brushes in that kit. I like the chiseled edge. I tend to use a lot of those anyway in my oil paintings, so they offer some nice opportunities for the way I paint with urban scenes and such to facilitate some crisp lines. And you can see, of course, right off the bat, some lines that went around, and I think that would be beneficial, like depending on how you toned your paper or what paper you worked on. And it doesn't mean I'm going to... you're going to necessarily save those, because these power poles, you'll see later on what I do with those. But one thing that was interesting as I'm applying the paint to the paper, I can really see that I think the Casein's really going to push learning to manipulate form in terms of color, temperature, shape, and all that by the application of the brush strokes, and not trying to brush around too much, but apply a stroke, apply another stroke. Maybe you're following the shape of the form, going across the form. It depends on
probably what you're painting. When you see the finished piece later on, I think because of the gray paper, there's no sealant on it, and possibly the paint sucked into the paper very minor level, because you do get a matte finish to this paint, and the vibrancy, it's almost like you're just looking at a memory in the finished painting, which is, I like the effect. I like a matte surface myself. I'm not into super glossy things. I think they're very visually distracting. One thing I will have to definitely work on is, it's only going to come with time from using the system, is coming up with a system, ease of use and that sort of thing. What I can say right off the bat is I do see the future being that plastic palette that I'm using not being really conducive to working with. I might somehow go to a glass palette or something a little more an easy surface you can clean off, because from what I understand, the Casein paints will eventually dry, and you can probably just pop those out of the color wells on the plastic palette. So I'll try that first, see what happens. A lot of learning curve here. I am looking into in a few weeks getting a book. There's an artist that follow her work on Facebook and such, and she's done a Casein book because she does a lot of Casein painting, so I'm going to order that. That should be useful for some information, techniques, and that sort of thing. So I don't want people watching this, watching my channel for the first time and see me doing a Casein painting when I'm an oil painter and thinking I'm a pro at this medium. I'm just trying to rely on some of the techniques I use in my oil painting and techniques I've used in the past for some of my water media paintings years ago. And one thing I do find, even this far into not too far into the painting, I can see how I'm really going to like being able to adjust shapes by cutting around. Like maybe I feel like I might be trying to save a shape too much, and if I get into it and mess it up a little bit, I can always come back with the layer around that shape and correct it and make it an accurate shape. So I did notice, and it's probably going to be affected by humidity changes, like if you're painting outside and such, but I could be working like I am now with the shadows of some trees on the snow, and maybe I want to do a little more in the sky, and by the time I get to the sky, it's going to be dry, and I can layer colors right back over it. And it makes for a nice, interesting visual, because I've been wanting to experiment with more abstract type of variety when you look up close on the painting, even though it's kind of a realistic scene, and then it kind of comes together as you step away. I find paintings like that very interesting, and I've been trying to push that and not have too much finesse and glossed over shapes in terms of perfect rendition sort of thing. Now, if anyone out there has been working with Casein also, along with their painting, oil painting, and you have some ideas that would be useful for me, some maybe reading resources that would be helpful, drop a line in the comments and let me know. I'm actually been looking for stuff, like trying to watch some YouTube videos, and there's stuff out there, but it doesn't seem very in-depth, unless I'm missing something. I don't know. Of course, I started all this journey by watching James Gurney's channel, and sometimes you wish all the videos a little more in-depth. He's so good, but he has some interesting ideas and methods that he uses. So here's what I'm talking about, like really I'm just kind of loosely brushing in a base tone for the road here, and then I let me try to mimic scumbling some layers, subtle value shifts to show direction in the road and lead the eye in, and also just to suggest detail in this wintry side road here. And I thought it turned out pretty well. I was pretty happy with it, and really kind of getting into just scumbling paint over more paint within a few minutes, and really getting that drag effect, and just by having the values close together, it can suggest when you step back a little bit, a continuous color, which is, I think, pretty cool. Now, in some of this video, you will see it kind of sped up just a bit. I used a little bit of time lapse in parts to speed up the process, and so that's why sometimes you might think, wow, he's painting really fast, because it's not a super extreme time lapse. But anyway, and just kind of getting a feel of putting some shadows on the road. And you can see on the left there, I realized my mistake, like, oh no, I painted the shadow on the road onto the snow. Now I'm going to have to correct that here in a minute. And just kind of got ahead of myself. And, you know, what are you going to do? It happens. I do like the composition of this, and I'm thinking of really seeing how I could try out ideas for oil paintings, maybe in different palette arrangements before I commit to the more expensive oil paint and surfaces for oil painting. I think that's going to be an interesting thing to look into and take advantage of. So here's what I like about the chisel brushes. I can just cut across with the flat and create the chimney and whatever shapes, and little windows here just touching the paper. Worked out pretty well. I was pretty happy with that. I'm actually contemplating too, over time, if these little sketches work out well, of actually kind of selling some matted versions, you know, put a little inexpensive frame around them or something, and just try to have another price point to my painting levels, but also it'll give me a way to be creative in different ways rather than just do all oil painting. And I think that's going to be kind of fun. We'll see. Here I'm painting those two little windows, and the size of the flat was too much to go crossways like that right there. But I use, as you can see, the white, the yellowy sunlit side of the building to reshape those windows. So that's what I mean about cutting around your positive shape of that window with the negative shape of the sunlight on the building. Worked out pretty well. And as I watch this in playback, it is kind of fun watching it develop. And you know, you see parts in the beginning of your work that potentially that, oh no, I don't know if this is going to work out, but then it just kind of comes together, and it's pretty interesting. I like it a lot. It does help, obviously, to have the reference material right adjacent to your painting surface. I think it's a quick reference to compare angles if you were really kind of concerned about that, rather than have it too far away. So something to keep in mind also. So we're almost finished up with this little sketch, and hope you enjoyed the video. Leave some comments. If you have any questions, I'll try to answer them. But here's what I ended up with. Not too bad. I kind of like it.
So okay, I just completed the painting, and I'm pretty happy with how it came out, considering it's my very first attempt at Casein. But it was more about kind of feeling out the medium, see how the paint applies, what I'm going to need to do in the future to apply paint in a more efficient manner, that sort of thing. But pretty happy with it. I'm not sure how the camera close up here. We'll also do a little end screen thing too, but next time I do a Casein, I'll be using, I used of course some gray tone paper, and I'm going to be experimenting on different surfaces, white paper, paper tone with like bright yellow and that sort of thing in the future. So be looking for those, and I think it's going to be a lot of fun. And it's going to be a great little sketching medium for outdoors. When the weather gets nicer, there's still a lot to work out in terms of my kit. The efficiency of use of the kit out in the field, or even just setting up in the house, that sort of thing. Biggest next thing I got to work on is what kind of easel support for my pad of paper that I want to use outdoors. That's next big thing. Of course, I've seen James Gurney's version of an easel thing with torsion hinges and all that. So I'll be reflecting on a few things that way from my particular setup, and see what happens. So thanks for joining me. Until next video. Bye.